So today's lesson is all about creating job resumes. We're going to talk about what it is, how to do it, and we're going to get started. So what is a resume? It's basically a document that you take with you to job interviews or submit to potential employers to request an interview. On it, you'll list your background, your skills, your education, and any and all accomplishments. Also, I want to point out resume is spelled exactly the same way as the word resume, which means to start something, and there's really no good reason for it. And this is why English is confusing. Okay, there are many different types of resumes. The older you get, the more experience that you have. And also, when you start to go into different types of specialized fields, there are different types of resumes for those fields. However, all resumes do have some basic common components. So, all resumes have 5 basic components. They include your contact information, an objective, list your work experience, your education, and your skills and your strengths. Other very common components in a resume can include any certifications that you might have, any extracurriculars or community service you've done, and also a list of activities such as, do you play sports? Do you speak a different language? Do you volunteer anywhere? This is a good way to show your personality on a resume. So here is just an example template of a resume. I've listed all the different parts of it, contact, objective, etc. And we're going to go through each one of these parts. So the first one we're going to talk about is the contact information. Always put your first and last name, on the top of the resume. You want to make sure that it's bold, that it stands out. This is the first thing that the potential employer will see. So you want to make sure that your name stands out from the rest. Always include your home address and make sure that your phone number is easily visible next to your name. So that way, if they do want to interview you, they can find it quickly. Also list a professional email. So I know I've talked a lot about professional emails in the last lesson, but this is why it's so important. Again, to remind you, it should be a combination of your first and last names, no offensive wording or numbers or nicknames. And then make sure your name is saved correctly in the email settings, no nicknames. So this is an example of the contact information on a sample resume. So, parts of a resume, objective. This is where you make your first real impression on the potential employer. In the objective, you're going to state what your career goals are, highlights your best skills. It should be short. I recommend only 1 to 2 sentences. So, here's an example of an objective. Brad is applying for an entry-level office position. This could be receptionist, this could be customer service, and this is an example of an objective. Highly motivated professional seeking meaningful employment as an office administrative assistant with the opportunity to learn and grow. It's short, it's 1 sentence, and it tells us that Brad is a professional and he's not just looking for any job. He's looking for a job that's going to give him the chance to learn and grow, which means he's looking for more of a long-term commitment, which might be attractive to a potential employer. Okay, so this is a more basic objective. If Brad was applying for a retail position at the mall, here he lists that he is reliable, mature, and creative high school junior seeking a part-time retail sales associate position with a growing clothing company to gain experience and insight into the fashion industry for a future career in fashion and design. So this tells us that Brad has a passion for clothing and fashion, and that might be an attractive characteristic for somebody who's looking to fill their store with people who love clothes. Also, I found this objective here. I linked it. It's a website that has really cool tips and tricks for people who are looking for those types of jobs. Okay, so if you're applying to a bunch of different jobs and you don't want to edit your objective a million different times, Another option is to make a more general type of objective. So here's an example. Reliable, respectful, and mature high school senior seeking a challenging position to help utilize my positive social skill sets with the opportunity to learn and grow. So this one clearly is not tailored to a specific job, but it's general enough that most companies can apply it to themselves. If you speak more than one language, you want to list that in your objective. So in this case, we could change it to reliable, respectful, and mature high school senior seeking a challenging position to help utilize my positive social skill sets with the opportunity to learn and grow, fully fluent in both English and Spanish. Okay, so this is an example. This is where that objective would go on a resume, at the top, right underneath the contact information. Okay, so the next part of a resume would be listing your experience. So this is where you list all of the past jobs that you had, typically in chronological order, which means by the date. So from newest to oldest, or sometimes you could do it by most relevant, which means if you're applying for a similar job that you had 2 jobs ago, you might want to highlight that one first to show them you have experience in that field. So in your experience section, you always include the dates you were employed. I typically recommend just doing the month and the year. Trying to find exact dates can be difficult. What job title you had, the name of your former employer, a brief description of what you did, and also, again, keep it short, keep it simple, just describe the responsibilities. And if you were promoted or bumped up in any way or applauded at that job, you want to list that too. So here's an example of experience listing. January 2016 to August 2016, As Seen on TV. Side note, I used to work at As Seen on TV in the mall. It was an interesting job. And then here, look at the description. Prioritized customer service and satisfaction by staying up to date with all new products and services, ensured sales floor was neat, efficient, and fully stocked at all times. So this tells you you were a basic sales associate at the mall, but the way you describe what you had to do is creative, clear, and says all the good things. Okay, so for those of you who've never had a job, that's not a problem. You can still fill out the experience section. Experience doesn't necessarily only apply for paid labor. So if you can answer yes to any of these questions, then you have experience and you can list it as such. So here's an example of Brad providing childcare, aka babysitting, and then listing his responsibilities. So consistently provides high quality care to younger siblings when necessary. Duties include ensuring everyone is properly fed, cleaned, and supported. Additionally, assisting with homework and playtime. So basically, you're taking care of your younger siblings. This could be like the year they were born, when you started to do and have these responsibilities. And if you're doing it to this day, then you would list present because you're still doing that. And then here it shows that you are able to do all of these things for other people. And these are characteristics that an employer might find attractive. Okay, so the next section in a resume would be listing your education. So here you would just list all of the schools you attended. If you're still in school, and if you're listening to this, you probably are, then you would just put the projected graduation date. You do not need to list your middle or elementary schools unless they're somehow relevant, but I don't really see how. You would want to add any clubs or sports and extracurriculars that you participated in. If you didn't, that's not a problem. Just describe your best student qualities. So here's an example. So this first one is for somebody who high achieving in a bunch of extracurriculars, etc. Again, you probably started 2018, graduation 2020, and then you can tell them projected graduation date May 2020. You're going to get a diploma, you went to Antioch High School, and then here you just give a brief description. So 3.0 student council, Latino achievers, respectful and courteous student with good working relationships with all staff members and instructors. If you are not big on extracurriculars and maybe your GPA isn't something you want to brag about, totally fine, still list it, but you can just leave it to hardworking and respectful student with good working relationship with all staff members and instructors. Okay, it still says good things about you. You don't have to add these things if you don't have it. Okay, so if you're the type of person who has a long list of extracurriculars, you may want to make a separate section for them. You would describe them the same way you would describe job experience. In this case, I recommend listing them in order of importance. So if you're in student council and you have an official title in student council, that's the one I would put first because that's the most impressive. When listing your attributes, put the more impressive things first. Yeah. You can also call this section clubs and organizations. Up to you. I think extracurriculars sound better, but again, totally up to you. This is an example of an extracurriculars section in the resume. Okay, so now we're going to list the skills. You don't want to write them in complete sentences. They're basically just bullet points. You want to start with the most particular or specific and then end with the more vague stuff. So here's an example. So skills, if you understand how to use Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, you would list those here. Professional email communication, multitasking, detail-oriented, quick learner. So these are more specific and these are more vague. So again, specific first, vague later. If you speak more than one language, this is where you want to put that also. So you put it in your objective and you put it in your skills. If you speak more than one language, I would put that on the top. That would be my number one. So like Spanish speaking or fluent in Spanish. That sounds better. Again, all of you should put professional email communications because we went through that lesson and you are all now professional email communicators. So the last part of a resume is usually called the activities section. This is where you showcase more of your personality that doesn't really have to do with your past work experience or your education. So here are some things that you might want to mention in this section. If you play sports officially or unofficially, if you just like to play a pickup game with your friends on like weekends, you can still list that. You still play a sport. It doesn't have to be an official team. If you like being outdoors, if you love animals, cooking, baking, these are things that maybe an employer can see this and feel like your personality would work really well with their setting. And this also gives them a glimpse of like who you are personally. So here's an example of an activity section in the resume. I currently play in a recreational indoor soccer league, which has helped me develop discipline as well as organizational and time management skills. I also enjoy reading and most outdoor activities. So you're still selling yourself, right? Showing what doing this has done for you, right? So you're still relating it to the job application, but giving them glimpses of your personality as well. Okay, so here's an example. Hopefully, with all the different sections put together, your resume will look something like this. Again, take a look at the format. It's clean, it's neat. Before even reading anything, it's visually clear. I can see each section right away. The name stands out at the top. You want your resume to look like this. This is a good, clean resume. Okay, so things to remember when making a resume. The most important thing I would say is keeping it neat and uniform. Again, before reading your resume, I should just be able to look at it and just feel that it is neat, organized, and formatted. Attention to detail is key. You want to make sure that you're taking your time with the formatting. The fonts should look the same. Okay, you shouldn't be using 5 different million fonts. I recommend picking a format at the beginning and then sticking with it. Again, there's 2 types you can do. We talked about this earlier. You can do chronological, which is listing things by date, or functional, by most important to least. Also, though, I will say the resume that we created for Brad Pitt is kind of a both. So experience is done by functional, right? And the extracurriculars are done by chronological. So pick one. Okay. Keep things simple, to the point. Do not make long, dragged out sentences. And I would say avoid writing in the first person in most of the sections. So in the part where you're listing your education and your job experience, stay out of first person, write it in third person. But in the parts where you are showcasing your personality a little bit more, then I would say it's okay to use first person. However, when in doubt, always just lean on third person. Okay, the last final thoughts I have about resumes are spell check, grammar, punctuation. These things matter. Spelling errors imply laziness, and that is a big turnoff to employers. So take the time to do it right. If you see a red squiggly line, a green squiggly line, blue double line, I don't know what program you're using, pay attention to those things. They matter. And again, less is more. Your resume max should be 1, maybe 2 pages. I would argue for the typical high school student, your resume should really only be 1 page. Your employer or future employer isn't trying to read a bunch of different things, right? They want to find the best candidate for their position quickly. So if you give them a short and concise resume, the better your odds are that they will actually read it and review it. Okay, so there are other things that are included when you submit a resume. One of those things is called a cover letter. This is a professional business letter you create that you basically tell the potential employer why you want that specific job and why you think you would be a great fit for that position. So this is a much more personalized letter than a resume. A resume is listing. The cover letter is like, hey, I saw this position. These are the reasons why I think I would be a great fit for that job. Another thing is references. If you get called in for a interview, they might ask you for a list of references. These are the people that you trust to vouch for you and say good things about you. There is a hierarchy on references. So this is the list of importance to least important. So if you have former employers that will vouch for you, they are number 1 on your reference list. Next after that, former coworkers. After that, administrators, counselors, teachers. If you're in a club or an organization, those people. And then for these, you would want to put the people that you feel the closest to and have the more positive things to say. After these people, any community members, anybody out in your community that you work with, have a working relationship with, have done projects with, these are people you can list as well. And then lastly is family. So I would limit family references to just 1 or 2 max, right? Because employers expect that if you're listing a family member, that they will just say good things about you because they love you, right? These people, maybe not so much about the love part, but can talk more about your skill strength objectively. Okay. Final thoughts. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you're writing a resume, Google other resumes and take what you like from them. Google resumes for the same type of job you're applying for. Look at what they're saying on their resume. See if it applies to you. If you like the language, use it.
When starting with the template, don't be afraid to delete sections. So if you go on Microsoft Word and you and you look for resume templates, you're going to get a bunch of different kinds, and they'll have pre-made sections. If they do not apply to you, delete them, okay? Or change them to something else. Customize it to you to better suit your particular strengths. And here are some links to some websites that I found useful when making this lesson. They have some good advice, some good wording to look at, and that's it. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and I look forward to getting professional, wonderful resumes.